People keep asking for this, and considering last night I made my Twitch actually twitchy again for the first time in 5 years, it's gonna be really funny when someone rocks up and goes, "Aren't you that Hoi4 Twitch streamer that was tiny that I used to watch 5 years ago?" Yeah, yeah, it's all streamed like my YouTube channel now. Look, I've got special things like I can do this now, and look, it's got the nice logos that I made. I made logos and stuff, a whole intro thing. Um, well, hi Falcon. Hi Louis. So people have asked me to react to Zoomer Historian a lot. Um, this is gonna be a vibe. I'm doing it on Twitch because I can say swear words a bit more and not affect my bottom line. Uh, Now I've watched part of this, the first 3 minutes of this video, and we're gonna be here a little while, and I'm gonna take apart a lot of what he says, but there's so much that he says that it's kind of, yeah, I'm only going to be attacking the first few things. I will actually post this on my second channel, probably, maybe 50-50. Yes, you are watching NNN Part Ho. This is the NAFO News Network, and I totally didn't forget to update the stream name before I hit the go live button, because I'm... Um, but, let me know how the audio is, how everything is, because, yeah, I don't Twitch stream. I only did it last night, because Digi said, yeah, why not? Um, But yeah, I did add some emojis to the stream for subs, so they can do things like they've been there for years, but they can do things. Look, yay! Um, and also Falcon gave me the idea of doing this, and you can thank everyone can thank Falcon for this because Falcon inspired me, aka he just gave me the idea. But I am completely buying time here because I don't want to press the play button because it's Zoomer Historian. Um, for background, for those who don't know, Zoomer Historian is we'll just say he's an interesting fellow. He's British. He's the kind of British that Winston Churchill would want to. Let's just say Winston Churchill would do things to this man. Um, and yeah, thank you for following. I would like to see get up to like 500 followers. That'd be really cool. I'm at 148 now. But alright, let's press play.
Video called The Lebensraum Myth, in which I explained Hitler's reasons for declaring war on the Soviet Union in...
You don't have to explain Hitler's reasons, bud. On it, but continue.
1941.
What? Then what? Like, okay, now you have to go... Like, the thing people don't realize... Alright, we're going to do some maps here. Moscow to... There it is. Alright, we're doing mapping. We're doing maps, kids. Everyone be prepared for maps. Okay. The thing is, say the Germans get Moscow. Alright, let's be generous. Say they take Moscow with no issues. Now, they're here. The Nazi line's about, yeah, there, and then it goes down, and it kind of bulges out to here, and goes back. They take Moscow. By the time they're getting to Moscow, half Soviet government has already moved to Kazan. That's another 705 kilometers. You mean to tell me they're going to get from there to there and still keep pushing? Okay, and let's say for argument's sake they get to Kazan. What if the government just moves to Yekaterinburg? Like, it can leave. It can move. Trains exist. Like, yeah, this is a central rail hub, so it'll cause significant issues for resupply, particularly in the south. So most likely, Stalingrad would not able to be defended anymore, and most likely they would have to end up in there or moving up a line to here. But like, you mean to tell me the army that's dying in the Rasputitsa, that does not do well in that kind of mud with its link tracks, is going to go from here to here? Now, for those who don't know, I've been to this part of Russia before, this bit, and I've been all over Ukraine. Horrible in the summer. It's so hot. And then in the winter, it's freezing. So you mean to tell me that if they take Moscow, they're going to win? So this little attempt at bragging about them getting close to Moscow, I know what you're doing. It just doesn't work if you can read a map.
Actually offer Stalin, and instead of flying to Moscow for the talks, they took an extremely slow boat that took weeks to get there. Hitler and Ribbentrop jumped on the
That doesn't mean anything. It's the 40s. Okay.
opportunity and made a deal before the Brits could. The cost was the Baltic states, a place with a long history with Germany. If it meant saving Germany,
I like how he refers to the cost of the Baltic states as a long history of with Germany. By history, you mean highly genocidal crusades. That's what he means. He means highly genocidal crusades. He's just too cowardly and say it because they were slightly different kinds of white. But whatever.
from being surrounded,
There's a fire alarm.
albeit temporarily, then it was a necessary sacrifice.
What do you mean surrounded? Does Give me a second, kids. Give me a second. Where is it? Surrounded. Okay. Yeah, that's actually a pretty good photo of it. I won't show the initial pact because the initial pact had the Germans in Lithuania, but it didn't actually happen, so it's kind of irrelevant. Alrighty, again. Hi kids, we're looking at maps. Okay, so this is the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact and how it effectively split up Europe. So, Germany gets this land. The Soviets do get Bessarabia. That because it is contested, but they do get Bessarabia. But what does he mean surrounded by the Soviet Union? This is just a return to World War One borders. It genuinely is. It's not anything particularly insane. Like, yeah, it's like you can see the former territory of Austria-Hungary sort of in it. The only difference is this part here, which is like Western Ukraine and southern Poland today. Like, I don't see what his point is here. Someone said I'm quiet there. That should be a bit louder. Um, I don't see what his point is by saying that they're surrounded. It makes like a siege mentality, I suppose. Like the Reich must defend the siege or something. I'm not sure what he means by surrounded. I mean, initially it included Lithuania for Germany, but I'm not sure what he means by surrounded. Because if anything, the Germans in this situation would like they will hold the center of Poland. Like, yeah, this is a Wikipedia map. This is like the First World War. But where's the thing? Like that's the World War One map with the superimposed borders. Like if we actually look at the borders proper, the division occurs in Poland about here. Stop it. About here. Um, so if anything, like the border then runs south, and it's a relatively flat border except for this area here. So eventually the border is actually pushed forward, and the Germans gain this part of Poland. So they're not surrounded at all. Effectively, the only bits that's surrounded is here, which is in Soviet territory. And I suppose you could argue around here the Germans are a bit up because of the mountain range. So his point of here it is, yeah. His point of the Germans being surrounded. Where are they surrounded in this? Where are they surrounded? I would like to yeah. I don't see the surrounding, but okay, continue.
In Hitler's eyes. The idea that this was some kind of permanent alliance is ridiculous. The ideologies are simply incompatible. One is hyper-nationalist, the other is hyper-internationalist.
Are we gonna pretend that the USSR is not a hyper-nationalist Russifying empire? We just gonna pretend that the Holodomor and what happened in Kazakhstan didn't happen, that it's not a hyper-nationalist empire? Because it is. The Soviet Union is just the Russian Empire in a red trench coat. It is a absolutely nationalist empire, and Russification is at its core.
Just to name one key difference, there was always going to be
Also, It is incorrect in my opinion, and this is more of an opinion piece myself. Like there are a lot of people who disagree with me on this. I wouldn't necessarily call the Nazi state a nationalist empire. I would call it a racially motivated empire. Um, Given that the way it will treat you, if you're like a Dane, for example, and you fit the racial bill, you will be treated in the Nazi Empire just as well as you would be a full-blooded German in many sense because you would be of that correct ancestry. Unlike, for example, if you were a Slav. So there is, even if you were a Germanic Slav, so say for example you were from Volga, Russia, the Volga part of Russia at the time, the SSR, it's, yeah, that there is arguments to be made for and against that, and I understand why people argue against that. But personally, I would lean towards not arguing that Germany was a nationalist empire in the Second World War, rather that it was a racial empire. But that's a whole other thing, and I might make a video on it one day using Berlin Wipperman's book that I have. It's as a key source for that, along with a few others. But just so you're aware that that's what I mean. By when I say racial empire rather than nationalist empire. It's very simple when it comes to the Nazis to sort of put them in the bucket of nationalist super empire, but I think that does a discredit to what that state actually was. And the more and more I look at that state and study that state, I would turn around and basically say non-stop, and yes, I will hit dislikes, it doesn't show up in my recommendations. I would turn around and say effectively non-stop that the Nazis were more focused on racial purification rather than being an empire of nationalism and Germanism. Nazi Germany and Germany are two very different things, and the idea of Germany and Germanism can be traced back to 1848, and it's something that Bismarck actively tried to kill, and Germany also tried to kill it as well. Falco's new video is going to be amazing and you should watch it. But yeah, so that's my sort of gist. I know a lot of people will disagree with me on that, but that's why I tend to argue that Nazi Germany was more racial as an empire than nationalist. But tell me what you think in chat, whether you think I'm talking out my ass or not. I'm happy to be told I'm wrong about that because it is something very contentious, obviously. But it's a point that I will stand by pretty hardly if I am asked.
Friction. That friction was immediate. The Soviets ripped Bessarabia away from Romania and began to make moves towards absorbing the state as a whole, whether via their influence or just by straight up occupying it. There was constant border clashes between Romanian and Soviet troops.
Did he just say they would? I need that translation. There it is. Okay. Okay, where is that? Ha! Ha! Were lying. Article 3, it's the secret protocol. This is a translation of the pact. With regard to southeastern Europe, attention is called by the Soviet side to its interest in Bessarabia. The German side declares its complete political disinterest in these areas. They didn't give a They didn't care. They did not give about Bessarabia. That's not saying, oh, this guy's so stupid. Then I know what you mean by ethno-nationalist. I get that. But that also, I think, does discount the fact that Nazi Germany and Germany, like the ideas of the two kind of things, I think they're completely incompatible with each other. That I think Nazi Germany is completely incompatible to be called a German state, and it just so happens that it must be linked together because of history. When I look at Germany, I refer to Germany as its purest form, which is when the people founded it in 1848, not when Bismarck killed it and then Hitler remade it. So yeah, I knew he was lying. I have a copy of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact in paper. I just couldn't be asked picking it up.
Especially in the Danube Delta. As a result, the Romanians threw themselves into the arms of Germany. The Soviets then tried the
partially. That's a massive oversimplification to fit his point.
Same with Bulgaria and Turkey. Stalin wanted full control of the Dardanelles, so he tried to coax Bulgaria into teaming up on the Turks. The Bulgarians instead joined the Romanians in running into the arms of Hitler, as their country was bombarded with Soviet infiltrators and propaganda.
That's not the only reason the Bulgarians also had a government at the time who wanted to capture parts of Thrace, areas that it lost during the Balkan Wars and the First World War. It wanted to seize effectively what is northern Greece. And yes, there was some truth that it wanted part of Turkey, but it also wanted part of Greece, and it wanted to take Macedonia from the Yugoslavs, which had an ethnic, what's it called? Ethnic Bulgarian minority.
In the north, the Soviets were putting heavy pressure on Finland and were trying to influence the election in their favour, as well as
Yes,
meddling
that's
with
true.
Finnish politics in
That's
general,
true.
so they could set up a puppet regime. The Finns, too.
You can't say that because we don't know what their intention was. They may have had the intention of setting up a puppet regime. It's also highly likely that the Soviets would have flat out just annexed Finland, as they did to Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, as former territories of the Russian Empire. So we don't know if they were going to set up a puppet regime or move to annex. That's that might be me grasping at straws, but when you say something so definitive, you gotta have fact to back that up, and we don't know that. And they did initially establish a puppet regime, but it never went through because of the way that the Finns defended during that war. The fact is, we don't know if they were going to flat out annex or if they were going to flat out form a puppet. In Ukraine during the revolution just after the First World War, they had forced this effective setting up of multiple puppets, multiple SSRs, in the effect to break up the unity of the Ukrainian People's Republic, and they later used those SSRs to annex the country, effectively into the USSR. They did similar things in other former Soviet territories. So, yeah, while they did set up a puppet regime, yes, but we don't know the intent, and I don't think you can talk to the intent of the Soviets here without actually, being 100% sure. And you're not going to be 100% sure because Stalin probably wasn't 100% sure.
Who threw themselves into the arms of Germany, a nation they had incredibly close historical ties with.
Yes, but they didn't throw themselves into the arms of Germany. They were quite close to the Allies, and in fact, when the Finns and the Allies went to war with each other, the British and the Finns were in contact, and they were very apologetic about it because they didn't want to go to war with each other, but the Finns had no choice because the Soviets were on their border.
The most pressing matter of all, however, was the Romanian one. If the Ploiest oil fields just north of Bucharest were taken, then the German armed forces would grind to a halt. Romania produced more oil than every nation that would end up joining the Axis combined, as well as Japan and Spain. There simply was not another comparable source, and the German military could not function without it. Perhaps this issue, most of all, is what caused the war in the East. After all this had happened...
Wait, what? Yeah, I'm going to have to cover that because he's going to have Hitler on the screen. Let's just do this. I'm sorry, you mean to tell me that they started the Second World War, Operation Barbarossa, the war that Hitler wrote about in Mein Kampf, the fact that he wanted to, expand east, the fact that he spoke about it all the time, they started that over oil fields in Romania? Okay, hun. Okay. Bear with. I've just got a phone call coming. Had a scam call. Needed to go tell them to do some horrific things. Anyway, where were we? Okay. Back to this idiot.
And Hitler took a gamble to test the waters. He invited the Soviet foreign minister, Molotov, to Germany and invited him to join the Tripartite Pact, knowing the Soviets would refuse. Molotov immediately replied with a huge list of demands in order to join, and they were akin to handing over the Balkans to the Soviets, which obviously the Soviets knew Hitler would never accept. From this point on, war was on the cards for the near future. The Soviet build-up on the German border had been going on before this, but now it went into overdrive. The biggest concentration of troops in human history was lined up on the German border, as well as the accompanying airfields and tank parks. Most damning of all was the railway tracks lined up towards Germany. The railway gauges were the European gauge size, not the Soviet one. They were entirely offensive, not defensive. A Soviet invasion was not only
no. You can't say in the same sentence that the rail gauges are a different size on either side of the border, and then claim that on one side of the border it's offensive and on the other it's defensive. That's not how that works. They're either offensive or they're defensive. You can't have both. You really cannot have both. That's like me saying I have a shotgun and my friend has a shotgun. Mine's for defense, but he's going to hurt me. We both are sitting there with a shotgun. You That's not how that works. Also, hi Ben. Yeah, that's no, no mate. That's not how it works.
Probable, but inevitable. If the Soviets were given time to continue their build-up, then all would be lost. The USA was guaranteed to join the war in the foreseeable future. That
No, it
much
wasn't.
was clear, as
No,
the
it
US
wasn't.
Navy was already attacking the Germans in the Atlantic.
Okay, no, absolutely not. The United States Navy was not attacking the German Navy. It was defending against submarine warfare, which was being pushed onto its coastline. There was an instance already, I believe, of a US destroyer being attacked by a German submarine as well at this time. It is completely against all historical knowledge and precedents to say that the United States started the war against the Germans. It absolutely did not. That is a lie. That is a complete lie and a fabrication of events exactly as Joseph Goebbels said it happened. Right here, he is quoting Nazi propaganda. This is genuine Nazi propaganda right here.
All that was missing was a formal declaration of war. If mainland Europe were invaded by the Anglo-Americans and the Germans had to take troops from the east,
The word is liberated by Anglo-Americans. Liberated. In 45. Woo!
then the result would be obvious: total annihilation. Soviet policy
Yeah, definitely total annihilation, which is why the German state absolutely survived the Second World War and is now one of the most powerful states on the planet and in Europe.
had always been to let the Western powers obliterate each other so that they could capitalize.
Yeah, Vin, no, yeah, he just flat out said there was no anti-war movement in the US.
This situation was no different. They would pounce at the slightest sign of German weakness. The only option
No,
for the
they wouldn't.
Germans was to strike now. Soon, it would be too late. Perhaps it already was too late, but the Germans had to try before they were swallowed up by the industrial might of the Soviet Union. So, this is the real reason the Germans invaded the Soviet Union
it's
in
not.
1941. Anyway, this is what leads me to the point of this video. I was reading a book for another video and came across an explanation of Operation Barbarossa so egregious that I had to discuss it. The book was about Germany's allies on the Eastern Front, named Death on the Don by Jonathan Trigg. When it comes to the actual topic of Trigg's books, he's a decent author. I've read a couple of his books on the foreign SS divisions, but when he mentions the politics or reasons for the war, he enters the realm of propaganda and just
When he says propaganda here, what he's doing is he's saying that Trigg actually tells the truth. I actually think I know who Trigg is. Give me a second. Give me a second, kiddies. I'm Googling. Talk amongst yourself. Yeah, Trigg's actually a good writer. No. Trigg is a pretty good writer. He does tell it in very good narrative ways. Yeah. Now he served in Bosnia, Northern Ireland, Royal Anglican Regiment. Yeah, no, I know who that author is. He's actually a good author. Very good author.
straight up
Yeah,
misinformation.
Stalin also flat out issued orders not to provoke the Nazis. I just want to point that out. Stalin flat out gave that order. It's something we know quite a bit.
You could say he's a military historian, not a political one. I'll quote in full
Military history is political history. War is a part of politics.
his description of why Germany invaded Russia. Quote, Hitler's war, and this was one man's war, was also a
wasn't.
new type of conflict. Europe and Asia were used to wars of conquest, fought for land, resources, power, and prestige. But in the Russo-German struggle, these factors were secondary. This war was fought for one reason, and one reason only: race. Hitler's worldview
Yes, it was. It absolutely was. You can argue the politics, the geopolitics, whatever behind it. If you actually look at party propaganda, you actually look at the party itself, this party, the Nazi party, is an entirely racial party. This is a racial party. Everything the Nazis do can be crawled back to their belief on race. Every single thing. The entire party is rooted in racial underpinnings. Everything they do is racial. You look at every law they put through, every person they declare war at, it all leads to an overachieving goal. Now, whether or not the intention was to start the Holocaust from day dot and to actually just, kill everyone, or whether or not that developed as a part of the war and the part of conditions, that is a completely different argument. What the Nazis did is genuinely a complete racial state. Now, I'm going to recommend you all a book here. I'm going to really recommend you a book. Where is it? I have read it cover to cover, and I think it's one of the best books you'll ever get on the topic. Where is it? Open a new tab. There we go. This is a really blurry photo, but this book here, I really recommend this book by Michael Burley and Wolfgang Wipperman. Phenomenal book, and it will explain in depth to you how the Nazi state operated and the chaos and the insanity that was behind it. Okay.
View, his Weltanschauung was clearly expressed by his acolyte Heinrich Himmler, the
Not awesome.
sociopathic head of the SS, in a pamphlet he wrote entitled DSS. Quote, "As long as humans have existed on Earth, war between humans and subhumans has become a rule of history. As far back as we can see, this Jewish-led battle has become the natural course of life on this planet." End quote. In other words, whereas Karl Marx saw all history as a struggle between different classes, the Nazis saw all history as a war between races, a Rassenkrieg. The prize for the victor was world domination, and all that came with it, power and riches for eternity. While for the losers, the abyss of total genetic extinction beckoned. End quote. It's hard to know where to begin. The idea that Germany invaded Russia for reasons of race is beyond absurd. In fact, it's telling that he quotes Himmler and not Hitler in his description, and even then, Himmler is talking about another group, not committing such an act himself.
So he's a Hitler apologist, and he's trying to put the blame on Himmler. Just give me a second. Okay. Give me a second. Where is it? Where is that? I've got this written down. Where is it? Here we go. Alright, here is a quote. Let me just double check this is actually Hitler. Okay, so this is a direct quote from Hitler. "Czechs are a foreign body in the midst of the German community. There is no room for them or for us. One of us must give way. As regards the Pole, it's lucky for us that he's idle, stupid, and vain." Now, that's not talking about the Soviets, obviously, because Eastern Slavs and such, but that gives you an idea of Hitler's opinion on Slavs. And that's one of the... So the first three I thought of, I had to dull down because they're a bit, how you going? But that's one of them. That's definitely something he said about the Slavs, and yes, Himmler is Hitler's PR guy. So I just want to point out that he's trying to defend Hitler by insulting Himmler, but Himmler is a direct appointee of Hitler to be his mouthpiece and to run his secret police. So,
The reality is that the war was nothing of the sort. Firstly, let's look at it from a logical level. In 1941, Nazi Germany was in the middle of a war with the British Empire, in which she had no means of bringing it to an end. The Brits had dragged the Scandinavians into the war, and
Excuse me? Excuse me? Now, I've heard this argument a lot. That Britain dragged the Norwegians and Danes into the war. Yes, my Discord is making sounds. Let me just turn that off. That's I think that's Falcon talking, or someone in the YouTube Discord. Okay, we're gonna talk about this for a second. Okay, so Hitler wanted to reclaim part of Denmark because it was lost during the First World War. That's something that was on their to-do list for a while. It also would seize the Straits. Now, as for Norway, There is a lot of argument on how and why Norway entered the war. The fact was, if Norway didn't enter the war, it was a weak point for the Germans, so it actually made a lot of tactical sense to, if not seize it, to pacify it. Now, yeah, my impressions are okay, Zoomer, as well. Okay, we're going to talk. We're going to have a chat here. Britain regularly violated the territorial integrity of Norway, basically did not give a shit of the war. The HMS Cossack did it, the Royal Navy did it, there were British and French soldiers on their way to Norway to occupy key ports, basically to stop trade. That is a fact. But they didn't win because the Nazis invaded Norway first because they weren't sure what it was going to do. Norway was stuck in the middle here and it had to pick a side, and it picked the least psychotic side, except if you're a Quisling. Now, yeah, Anamaki did a great video on it, but saying that Britain and France forced the Scandinavians, and he can't even because Sweden was neutral, into the war, that's dishonest at best, stupid at worst.
Scandinavia had fallen. The Brits had dragged the war into the Balkans with the Yugoslavian coup, and some could even argue the Greek campaign. Everywhere the Brits...
No one can argue that they... The Italians invaded Greece.
Tried to expand the war resulted in failure for the poor countries they were using. Now it was just...
They were using, huh? Not that Germany was invading them. They were getting used. Okay.
The British Isles left of any importance, but the Germans had no means of reaching her by sea or by air. There was also no means of making...
What do you mean they had no way to reach it by sea? The of Britain happened, you idiot.
Peace. All peace offers, including one in which the Germans would leave all non-German land, was denied.
What's German land, bud? Because I know what peace offering you're talking about. What's the German land, huh? What is it?
Rudolf Hess had flown to Scotland to make peace. In return, he was imprisoned and refused access to the outside world for the rest of his life. Winston Churchill was hell-bent on war. He didn't care. He was being paid to go to war. It was a precarious situation.
I'm guessing the Jews were paying him, weren't they, Mr. Zuma? Are we going to go there?
Germany was fighting an enemy that was willing to sell off all the assets of her empire to the Americans simply to defeat Germany. There was no logic to be had.
What do you mean sell off the assets to the empire? What do you mean sell off assets? Are you talking about destroyers for bases? Are you talking about Lend-Lease? Which one? What are you referring to? You're not backing any of this up. These are just insane claims that you're throwing out there, then quickly moving on from.
On the British side. Now Germany was sat in Europe, knowing that the Americans would soon come. If that happened,
no one knew the Okay. No one could prove the Americans were soon coming. Okay, I'm gonna flat out say something here. Hitler was when he declared war in America. I'm glad he did, but he's an idiot. Now the thing is, Hitler declared war in America after Pearl Harbor. He did not have to go to war with America because initially America was only going to war with Japan. The United States only went to war with Germany after Hitler declared war on the United States. So, and also, yes, Churchill was not in power at the beginning of World War II. He only took over after France fell, basically. France was on its last legs when he joined. Belgium was about to fall when Churchill took power. I don't remember the exact day off the top of my head. Got it written down somewhere. But yeah, okay. Sure thing.
The Soviets would come crashing down on them, as they had been preparing to do. Does this sound like a scenario to suddenly begin a side quest in the form of a race war? Or does it sound like a...
There was no side quest. The whole First World... God. The whole Second World War was a race war. Everything the Nazis did was a race war. Yeah, that was it. Norway happened 3 days under Churchill. The whole Second World War in Europe was a yeah, that was it. It was just the Norwegian campaign. Sorry, I got my dates wrong. Belgium was not long after that, though.
Backed into a corner situation where Germany decided to preempt the Soviets before the opportunity was lost. Let's ask Hitler himself. I'll use a quote that Trigg in fact quotes in his own book. This is the Führer himself speaking to his soldiers before they set off east.
So
Quote,
we can believe Hitler's quote here, but we can't believe the one where he calls the Slavs subhuman, basically. Okay.
soldiers of the Eastern Front, weighed down for many months by grave anxieties, compelled to keep silent, I can at last speak openly to you, my soldiers. About 186 Russian divisions are lined up along our frontier.
I
For
fucking
weeks,
wonder
this
why.
frontier has been violated continually. Not only the frontier of Germany, but also that in the far north and in Romania. A build-up is in progress which has no equal in world history. You are standing on the Eastern Front. In Romania, on the banks of the Prut, on the Danube, down to the shores of the Black Sea, German and Romanian troops are standing side by side, united under the Conductor Antonescu. You are about to join battle, a hard and crucial battle, the destiny of Europe, the future of the German Reich, the existence of our nation now lies in your hands
He's
alone.
gonna have to
End
change
quote.
his pants
To
after
me,
this, I
this is
swear.
an open and shut case. Others may say, however, that Hitler was simply lying and that this was a pretext. In response,
That's psyching up his soldiers. Well, that is quite literally the definition of propaganda, dude. That is the definition of propaganda. Right there. That's propaganda. When like the Eisenhower speech before D-Day is a form of propaganda to the soldiers. This is propaganda at its core. There is no if, but, or maybe here. This is genuine propaganda. This is how propaganda works. Like, I mean, he insinuated that Hitler doesn't or never lied in this point. Sure, whatever. Which is funny, because, like, apparently Hitler never said anything bad about the Slavs, even though I gave you quite, like, 10 seconds ago that said that he was calling the Slavs subhuman. But, you know, woohoo. But, like, alright. How the more subscribers than me actually put effort into my videos?
I would say, who was Hitler lying to? Germany was a pariah state, hated by the world. Why would he need to lie to his men?
No, it wasn't. If it was a pariah state hated by the world, why did it have so many dude? Why was so much of the Balkans aligned to it? Why was Japan, technically, aligned to it? Why was Italy, technically, aligned to it? Why was Manchuria? You had South American countries who were also on your side, largely. Like, my guy, Sweden was trading with you, dude. Like, you are not a pariah state, Germany. You're just a pariah state to the Allies at this point. Yeah, but the problem is if we don't basically call him out as being a lying little Nazi piece of shit, then he'll keep going because the only way to fight enemy is this kind of stupid is by telling the truth. Even if no one listens, you still got to scream it.
They were all on the same page. These men were willing to lay down and
Love how
die
he's
for
showing the
Hitler
footage of Hitler
and
being
for
nice.
National Socialism. If he had told them it was a race war, they would have marched east for Hitler's race war, regardless of how silly such a thing would have sounded at the time. The reality.
Alright, give me a second. Give me a second. Where is it? Where is it? Ha! Okay. Alright, you guys are gonna. I knew it was in that speech. So Hitler's proclamation on the 22nd of June, 1941. Now, he cut off before we get to this bit. Here we go. This is directly from Hitler. You probably all felt that this was a bitter and difficult step for me. The German people have never in their hostile feelings towards the people of Russia. During the last 2 decades, however, the Jewish Bolshevist rulers in Moscow have attempted to set not only Germany but all of Europe aflame. And then he goes on to say, Germany has never attempted to spread its National Socialist worldview to Russia. Rather, the Jewish Bolshevist rulers in Moscow have constantly attempted to subject us and other European peoples to their rule. Not that they're invading everyone else, but whatever. So, You mean to tell me in that little speech there that you just said was true because Hitler said so and he was not doing it as a race war, where he's flat out turning around and calling it the Jewish Bolshevik threat, is not a racially motivated factor? We're not gonna. We're not gonna point that out. We're not gonna bring up the rest of Hitler's speech there, Mr. Zuma historian. It's like 3 lines down on it. It's not very far. You can all Google Hitler's proclamation on the 22nd of June 1941 if you want the full speech. But that's what he just quoted. And I knew he was missing a bit at the end of that. I knew there was a bit missing.
Is that he didn't say it was a race war, and that was because it wasn't one. Under this
I'm a
quote of
Zoomer too.
Hitler's,
Don't worry.
Trigg somehow goes on to say, quote, "So, with the prophetic words of Adolf Hitler,
Nice propaganda.
Führer of Nazi Germany, and the man about to launch the mammoth venture that was Operation Barbarossa, planned in 1940, the intent was to destroy communism as an ideology and occupy the Western and Central Soviet Union all the way to the Ural Mountains in the east, with a border running on the line from Archangel in the north to Astrakhan on the Caspian Sea in the south. Once this was achieved, Himmler and his SS were to go to work exterminating and enslaving the majority of the former Soviet peoples in order to create a new German empire in the east, the so-called Lebensraum for the Aryan master race that he and Hitler fantasized about." End quote. Whilst writing this script and having to read these quotes, it's genuinely hard to keep a straight face. The most horrifying thing of it all is that people genuinely believe this stuff.
Why do people believe that? Well, let's just see. There's this giant cavern called Babi Yar. Now, Babi Yar is a place in the former Soviet Union in Ukraine. Let me just find you a direct quote from Anatoly Kuznetsov. He was a Ukrainian Russian who fled the Soviet Union. I have his biography. It's an amazing read, but it hurts to read. Oh. Here we go. This is when he goes to Babi Yar after the war. A riverbed he used to play on. The riverbed was of good coarse sand, but now for some reason or other the sand was mixed in with little white stones. I bent down and picked one of them up to look at it more closely. It was a small piece of bone, about as big as a fingernail, and it was charred on one side and white on the other. The stream was washing these pieces of bone out of somewhere and carrying them down with us. From this we concluded that the place where the Jews, Russians and Ukrainians, and people of other nationalities had been shot was somewhere higher up. We carried on walking for a long time on these bits of bone until we reached the very top of the ravine, and the stream disappeared in place where it first formed by the many springs which trickled from the layers of sandstone. It must have been from here that there was a point with it must have been from there that it carried the bones down. At this point the ravine became much narrower and split into several branches, and in one place we saw the sand had turned grey. Suddenly we realized we were walking on human ashes. That is a reading from Babi Yar by Anatoly, also known as Kuznetsov. He was a writer from Ukraine. He lived in Kiev when the Germans took it, and he witnessed firsthand what happened at Babi Yar. Zoomer historian. We have so many first-hand account of this. That is what the Einsatzgruppen was up to. And if you don't believe that, read the first-hand accounts of the Reserve Police Battalion from Hamburg that undertook these killings. We know this happened.
Let's look at the reality. The Germans marched into the Soviet Union and were greeted by most with open arms.
No, they weren't.
For now, they would not be needed as soldiers, but thousands upon thousands.
Okay. This is something that, yes, the Russians also bombed Babi Yar. Okay, this is something that gets lauded at all the time to show that Ukrainians were Nazis, and I hate this myth. Initially, the Ukrainians welcomed the German soldiers into the Ukrainian SSR because they reminded them of the German soldiers from the First World War who helped secure their independence from the Soviets and helped keep them independent. That is a fact. What changed and why there were more Ukrainians per capita fighting in the Red Army than almost any other group of people, and there were 5 million of them under arms at the end of the war, was they started killing everyone. If you are a Ukrainian, you are 20 years old, and you have lived through the Holodomor from your age of 10 to 20. You've watched your family starve to death. And then the Germans appear, and you've heard stories from your grandparents and your parents that they came and saved you during the First World War and the Revolution. Would you two not support them initially? It is basic common sense. Common sense. And you're right, hating Stalin allowed the Nazis to take advantage of them. But you know what? That lasted about a week. A week or so.
Thousands volunteered to help the Germans regardless. They were especially well received in Ukraine
No, they
and
were
in the
not.
Baltic states.
Initially,
Soon,
for a
however,
second.
hundreds
That's
of
it.
thousands of these men would be allowed to volunteer to fight alongside the Germans. This is where the narrative runs into serious problems. If these men were viewed as subhumans who they were about to kill, why on earth would they arm them? In Ukraine, Trigg even states in his own book that the Germans enforced their anti-abortion laws there and arrested abortionists. If the Germans wanted to kill these people, why would they punish practices which lowered their birth rates? Are we to believe, as Trigg states, that as soon as the Germans reached the Urals, then some kind of real-life Order 66 would come into effect?
It was already in effect. Baba Yar has over 30,000 bodies in it. Over 30,000. They did start killing them. This is okay. This is kind of going to clean Wehrmacht territory, but bear with me. Not every single person in the German army was an absolute psycho murderer. The horrific crimes that were undertaken during the Second World War by the Germans was not generally by the frontline soldiers. It was by the Einsatzgruppen and the rear echelon soldiers, very similarly into the Soviet Union. When the Soviets pushed into Germany in the Second World War, the mass rape and slaughter of German women and children and elderly, that did occur, and it was an act of genocide, it absolutely was. That occurred by second echelon and third echelon units predominantly. It's not the frontline troops that usually do it because, quite frankly, they don't have time. And if they did, do you really think their crimes are going to be reported or being given a It's quite often in these situations that the Nazi army and the Wehrmacht is called the clean Wehrmacht because there's no explicit evidence at the start of the war or during the initial invasion. And that is because they didn't have the time to do it. But make no mistake, when the time came, it absolutely happened. Baba Yar has tens of thousands of bodies alone. And there are so many other mass graves in Eastern Europe. I've seen them with my own eyes. They exist.
We are meant to believe that the Germans would suddenly turn on their comrades in arms, men they had fought and died with, and just kill them? Or is it more likely that me, as well as many other historians, are quite right in suggesting that the war had a far more logical cause? People talk of plans that...
Okay, let's just get the... Okay, so we estimate let me just bring up my stats. I have a cheat sheet. So the population in 1940 in Soviet Ukraine was about 30 to 40 million, I believe. Let me just double check. It was 30,960,000. As according to the Soviet census. Now, we aren't entirely trustworthy of that because of the Holodomor and other events, but that's about 30 million. Of that 30 million, okay, of that 30 million, okay, of that 30 million, can we get in chat? Can you take guesses how many actually joined the Nazis? Of that 30 million, how many joined the Nazis? I'll give you like a minute. Okay. It was about 250,000. 250,000 at the absolute limit, and that's not necessarily fighting for the Nazis, that's acting as police. That's basically anyone who collaborated. So the collaboration amount was 250,000. Would you like to guess in chat now, of that 30 million, how many fought in the Red Army? We'll give that a few seconds. 30 million, 250,000 joined the Nazis. How many fought in the Red Army? 7 million. 7 million, actually. I was wrong. 7 million went under arms or joined the war effort in some way. 7 million of the 30 million. Yeah, they definitely helped, didn't they? They definitely were massive Nazis. Yeah. People do not realize how many Ukrainians fought them. That photo of the red banner over the Reichstag has no Russians in it. It's got Dagestanis, Ukrainians, and other members of the SSRs in it. Ukraine did not join the Nazis. It had collaborators. It did not join the Nazis.
The Germans had for the East, but conveniently for people like Trig, all of these happened to be magically burned. So instead, let's focus on the reality. What happened under the few years of German occupation in the East? Let's ask one of the most respected historians of the 20th century, A.J.P. Taylor. He explains the reality in depth in his book, The Origins of the Second World War. Quote, "But was Lebensraum Hitler's sole idea, or indeed the one which dominated his mind? To judge from Mein Kampf, he was obsessed with anti-Semitism, which occupies most of the book. Lebensraum gets only 7 of the 700 pages. Then, and thereafter, it was..."
Yes, it does only get 7 pages, but what does he refer to the Bolsheviks as, mister? What does he call the Bolsheviks? They are Judeo-Bolsheviks. What must he say must be destroyed? Judaism. I wonder if they are connected. I wonder if there is any kind of connection between Judeo-Bolshevism and Jews and Bolsheviks and Lebensraum. I wonder what that could be. And yeah, no, spare 15 strata. You could absolutely use that logic to say France collaborated. On the whole, actually, France collaborated more than the France actually collaborated more than the than the Ukrainians did in many areas. Not in all of France, mind you, but in some in some areas. Yeah, let's just yeah just yeah. Alright, where's my chat so I can put something in the chat? Oh, by the way, I'm gonna pin this. This is Falcon's new video. Let me pin that. That's Falcon's new video. When you're done. When we're done. Wow, testy blowout. Here we go. What are you gonna do? What the f you do? Like, you keep fighting or you die. Like, pick one. You're either running to South America or you're dying. Like, this isn't Red Orchestra. You can't team swap in real life. Like, what the f do you think's gonna happen here?
And his cause. Would they have done this if there was even the slightest inclination that they would be killed for being seen as Slavic Untermensch? The run-of-the-mill historians have got it wrong. Men espousing views such as Trig's cannot possibly believe what they are saying. Such things are simply wartime propaganda espoused by Stalin or Churchill. There is simply no basis in reality for the war in the East being a race war. In fact, it was quite...
Except, all the death camps and the Einsatzgruppe and the Dollarwangers, the reserve police battalions, the giant full of dead bodies, the executions, the villagers getting wiped out. I mean, I can keep going for like a month. I mean, I've got a biography here about Baba Yar that I read a passage from. Like, that's fun. Yeah, everything was planted by Winston Churchill on one of his benders. That's exactly what happened. It was all planted by Churchill, bro. It's all Churchill. You don't get it, bro. Dinosaurs aren't real. They're all Churchill.
Quite the opposite. One of Hitler's allies during Operation Barbarossa was Slovakia, who were Slavs. Another of Hitler's
Slovakia was also a puppet state, but we ignore
allies, who wasn't involved in the invasion, was Bulgaria, also Slavs. Furthermore, the Third Reich had the most diverse army in history. Muslims, Christians, pagans.
He did not just that. He did not stop. again, guys. Thank you for the 20 subs. Holy let's just go back and do that again.
Who wasn't involved in the invasion was Bulgaria, also Slavs. Furthermore, the Third Reich had the most diverse army in history, also Slavs. Furthermore, the Third Reich had the most diverse army in history,
One more time.
also Slavs. Furthermore, the Third Reich had the most diverse army in history.
Oh my fucking god. Okay, let's do maps again, kids. Let's do maps again. Let's do maps again. Do 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 do. Hi, so we're gonna look at something here. Where is it? Where is it? We're gonna find a map. Let's find a map. All right, you guys know what this is? Thank you so much. 20 subs. That's a lot. No, people are subbing. Thank you. Like, I've got 40 subs. Wow. Okay. There's a sub train. I never thought I'd do that. This is the British Empire. This is the British Empire. Now, this is Australia. This is New Zealand. New Zealand has Maoris. Australia has Indigenous Australians. There are over 100 or there are hundreds and hundreds of different nation states. Well, not nation states, different nations in Australia, such as like the Kabi Kabi and Ngunnawal, Eora, like, over 700 different native nations in Australia. Like it's insane. Yeah, the Noongar. There are so many people in Australia, the different nations. So that's 700 different possibilities. Then you have the Papuans, you've got the Kukuku, you've got other people, you've got the Bougainville, you've got multiple different people from here. This is just Australia. Then you have like 10 to 20 different nations in Malaysia. India is a of nations. You've got there's the Nepalese, the Bhutanese. Like, there are hundreds and hundreds of different nations, and every nation in the British Empire, every part of the British Empire, fought in the Second World War. And that's before we even get to the French Empire, which included Africans from so many different places. Like, we're talking like, you've got Indo-Chinese, Vietnamese, Laos, Cambodia, and in Vietnam itself, so many different nations and nationalities and cultures. The Thais, the Burmese, the Shan. I can go on for a year. I mean, the Shona, the Ndebele, the Kalanga, the Mau Mau. I'm going through Africans, the Zulus. We could be here for a decade. We're going through and explaining the different nationalities and the groups of people inside the British Empire that fought in the Second World War. And that's before we even get to Canada, when we look at the Nunavut and we look at the Northwestern Territories. Yes, the British Empire was the world's first DI military. Yeah, we'll go with that. I'm not gonna say the Booty Short Bros. I'm not gonna say that name. You've got so many different groups of people. And then we get to the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union is not one country, it is hundreds and hundreds of different cultures, cultural groups, historical national groups, republic groups that are all linked together, that are all different groups of people. You mean to tell me that you're telling me that the Nazi army, because it had a couple Muslims in it, was the most... Let's just hear him say it again.
Also Slavs. Furthermore, the Third Reich had the most diverse army in history.
Nah, it didn't, bud. No, it didn't. It really did not.
Muslims, Christians, pagans, Germans, Scandinavians, Frenchmen, Slavs.
Why do you say Germans separately to Christians? Okay.
Balts, Armenians, and an almost unlistable variety of peoples were fighting and dying on the Eastern Front together. After all, Trig already knows this, considering he has half a dozen books on the various foreign SS divisions. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then please do leave a like. As always though, the biggest thanks of all goes to my Patreon, Subscribestar, and YouTube members who make these videos possible. My videos are not monetized immediately and have to undergo a manual review. As a result, the vast majority of my income comes from subscription sites such as these. As this is my full-time job, these people literally make this possible, and I cannot thank them enough. So if you enjoy the videos and you'd like to support me, join our Discord or our weekly Hearts of Iron 4 games, then please do
Of
consider
course he's a
signing
Hearts of
up
Iron
in one
4
of the
player.
links in the description. Thank you. Even the $2 tier helps immensely. Thank you to Lobster TU, Darway Lololol, Sigmar, Emperor Titus, Luke David Murphy.
He's just gonna load out these fucking patrons. What's a hype chest? What does that do? What does that do? Ooh, 20. Wait, how did the. Holy shit. Okay. Yeah, that Patreon logo is a choice. So that. That's. I have a train, I guess. Choo choo. Cool. Oh, interesting. Huh. That's cool. Hi. So that was an event. I don't want to watch Falcon's new video on stream because I want him to get all your views separately. 50 views is a lot of views, so I would really like. I'd love you all to go and watch it after this or just after, but like,
One of the most
shut up. Like, oh no, F off. You can't make a video on that country in 1 hour. And under 1 hour. I'm working on one myself. Shut up. I bet that's going one. Off. This guy's special. The the cat of everything is not in this bedroom. He's out in the lounge room. Um. Oh, that's going to be horrific. That's what we watched, by the way. Uh. Thank you, Airborne. I don't think he's a troll. I think he actually believes what he's saying. That's the worst part. Oh, here we go. That's fun. Oh, okay. See, okay. I'm curious how he's. Right. This was a choice. This, Okay. Well, he's definitely on a list, and I probably am too after that. Oh. Yeah, that doesn't go together, hun. That that doesn't go together, hun. I just So it looks like his little shill for the Nazis is coming over, so he's gonna go to our word place. That's interesting. Okay, that's. I cannot sit through an hour of this talking. I would blow my brains out. I'm not. No, I'm not gonna give attention to that little. Um. Yeah. Okay. What the fuck? The problem is, like, let's look at his comments. Let's go back to the video that we did. Let's do
I
this.
recently
Oh,
made a video.
shut up! I don't want to hear you speak. I can't say what just entered my head. Oh, I can't say what entered my head then. I can't say that. I cannot say that. I can't say that. He is obsessed with race. It is Hollywoodish. It's stupid. That's oh, actually, speaking of, this guy's great. Love this guy's videos. Um, that says more than you think it does. That says more than you think it does. Of course. Here we go. Ugh. That's a choice. Yeah, okay. Yep, okay. It's not getting any better, is it? Yeah. It's mm, it is an interesting name, isn't it, Ben? Yes. So the thing is, I'm not particularly left wing. Like, I mean, compared to this guy, I'm not, as compared to this guy. Like, I'm not a particularly left wing person. Like, I believe a lot in individual liberties and such, and everything. I'm not, a red flag waving unionist like Animarchy is. Like, I can believe he's a Zoomer. But, like, after reading this, I kind of understand the NKVD's point on some people. Oh, if they're gonna go for my mate potential history, that'd be so funny. It would not be a prison sentence in Germany. You would not get sent to prison for this. You'd probably get a fine. You wouldn't get sent to prison for this. This right here, okay, this is a key example of whataboutism. How can Nazis be bad if Britain conquer a quarter of world? Um, that's pure whataboutism. Two things can in fact be bad. John Smith, my hero. Oh, here we go. Yes, my boys. We found some sanity. Google it. It's not hard. Google Frederick Barbarossa. Someone with a brain. Oh, that's a sentence. Okay. Anyway, I'm gonna end this soon. I will preface that of the things I've said, if I've gotten something wrong, I apologize. 99% of this was me just going off the top of my head based on my studies into Nazi history. So if I got something wrong, mea culpa. I'm human. I'm not going to get everything right day to day. Like I got the date of the Norwegian campaign and the Belgian campaign and wrong, and that will happen. I'm not going to pretend I know absolutely everything. I am simply an person who is watching this for the first time. Now, And yeah, you were right on the train tracks. Um, so yeah, oh, I mean, 7 million people did prefer the Soviets, but so yeah, I'm not going to say I got absolutely everything dead on right, and I know that like when I put this up on YouTube on my second channel, they're going to find like the one thing I got wrong, or like the two things I got wrong, and be like, oh, everything is wrong because you got that one thing wrong, and then that'll be the exact voice they do too, because they can't actually through their mouths because they're like do anything with their lives, or their nasally is all there. But um um someone's going to clip everything that I do. It's great. I'm going to get taken out of context all the time on this. I have to say, the fact that I'm on 160 followers on this thing that I don't actually, I've only started using last night, and 40 subs, like that's insane. Like, I think it's like 40, 41, 40 subscribers. Yeah, that's cool. Like, genuinely, thank you. Uh, thank you to everyone who's following. Um, but yeah, people like this, they need help. Genuinely, like, I don't know any other way other to put it than that people like this need serious mental help. Because there's something wrong here. Something has gone wrong with this person's brain. And I don't mean to say that to insult him. I don't mean to say that to say that he's, I'm not going to drop a slur or anything. Like, something has gone wrong here. And I mean, personally, I think it's a lack of culture and social group as a teen. I think most likely Mr. Zumi historian here probably wasn't too popular, or he was lacking with the ladies, or something was going wrong with him in high school, and it made him become an outcast. So he went online and he found a little rabbit hole, and he found his little community where he felt special because he thought he knew everything. It's the same as with most conspiracy nuts. They go to these places because they feel special. They feel like they matter. They feel like they belong. It's a sad fact that is the world we live in. That it does happen. Personally, I don't think he's gonna come back from this. At least without some serious time off the internet. And yeah, I kind of feel like I'm not even mad at him. Like normally, like people like this, you feel mad at them, but it really is just a bit sad. Like, I mean, I don't know how to say it other than I pity him. I do. I pity how someone can be this paranoid and this taken in by propaganda. It's a terrifying thought that that is the world my children will grow up in, and that scares the ever loving hell out of me. But this guy, he's I pity him more than anything, more than he makes me angry. And yeah, he can call that woke nonsense or whatever, but it's just sad, man. You could have had a normal life, but instead, all you do is hate and try and defend the indefensible. There's no defending what the Nazis did. We we have the evidence. We have first-hand accounts absolutely out the arse. You can go and see the mass graves. It's the same as people who deny the Holodomor. Like, we can see it. We know it's there because it's there. It's a physical thing you can go and see. So I wish growing conch. I wish saying Hitler was evil wasn't considered woke, but yeah. Honestly, Templar Gaming, the bit where he started laughing, that just like concluded in my head that he was just a really sad guy. Yeah, like there's not much more to say than that other than that he's just a sad, sad person. And I don't think there's much that's gonna change that.